I've got a bunch of quotes, not from a saint, but from a president, Ronald Reagan. He was the president when I was growing up, right? The first president that I probably really remember in terms of like taking into account the words he's saying. And it was at that time where the threat of the Soviet Union and this threat of nuclear war and nuclear destruction was at its height. It really was in the 80s. It was at its height. And so I grew up in that time where even though we had this sense of kind of a peaceful life lived in our community, there was this sense of impending doom and threat that would come from the enemy that was on the outside, the Soviet threat, the threat of communism. And so Ronald Reagan has a number of quotes that circle around some of these themes connected to the discernment that we can have about our own call to spiritual battle, call to spiritual arms to fight this good fight of faith. First one's kind of funny. First one is, the most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." That is so good. It's a nice joke. I am from the government and I'm here to help. And you know what? In the best of situations, it's true. It is true. The government is intended to be of service to us in order to provide that sense of covering over our lives so that we can be a civil community. But let's just say that we've got to work harder to get more good people to commit to service in government affairs, in politics. And we, in the name of busyness, give ourselves too easy an excuse to not be engaged. And if we continue to have that be the case, we might find ourselves in circumstances where the laws and policies of our state, our local community, or the national government are a blasphemy and a tragedy and a travesty. And so when we see things like Roe versus Wade and so many other things that I talk about regularly on the program, thanks be to God that, Roe versus Wade was overturned this past year, and praise God for that. Well, we need to continue to press forward to live our faith in the public arena, live our faith in the political arena, live our faith in corporate America. But it's going to get harder. Second quote. This is one of the more, famous quotes that President Ronald Reagan said, connected to military service. He said, "Some people wonder all their lives if they've made a difference. The Marines don't have that problem. Some people wonder all their lives if they've made a difference. The Marines don't have that problem." I like that quote because it gets at something that is, fundamental for the human person. And that's that sense of the ache in the heart. And that ache in the heart is, first of all, an ache to know our own deepest identity. And that comes from our relationship with God, nothing else. But then there's also that dynamic thrust outwards into the world where we want to do something meaningful, noble, worthy. If we're going to spend our lives, we want to spend our lives on something worth giving our lives for. And so that sense of purpose and mission, Ronald Reagan, in hearing those words, the Marines must have just felt this beautiful sense of authentic pride in their sense of, yeah, hoorah, right? That they're making a difference, right? They're, put me on the ground first. I'm willing to fight the good fight. And so that's something that I would want for us, right? That's the kind of motto that I would want to have marking our lives. Some people wonder all their lives if they've made a difference. Catholics don't have that problem, right? Catholic Christian disciples of Jesus Christ who are living their lives to become the saint, fulfilling the God-given mission that is theirs, you won't have that problem. You won't have that problem. Okay. A few other quotes. Veterans know better than anyone else the price of freedom, for they have suffered the scars of war. We can offer them no better tribute than to protect what they have won for us. Veterans know better than anyone else the price of freedom, for they have suffered the scars of war. We can offer them no better tribute than to protect what they have won for us. I think that is so relevant. I mean, first of all, it's very powerful and true all by itself when it comes to veterans. And I can say this about my dad. So my dad knows better than anyone else the price of freedom, for he has suffered the scars of war. He suffers with PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And he has ongoing. So he was, when he went to war, he was 18. So literally his whole life, he's lived the remainder of his life, the last 72 years, he's lived with a serious form of PTSD. The entirety of him being my dad, I've known him as a father who has PTSD. And it has impacts. That was the price. Those were some of the scars and some other of the physical limitations that have impacted him, his hearing, his sight, some other factors that are traced back to his military service. It's like, wow, the cost of war. What did it cost? And yet, if you ask him, what were you thinking when you signed up for military, when you volunteered to go to the Korean War, to finish high school early, to be able to go fight in Korea? He never would ever have said, that was the biggest mistake of my life. I regret that. I've never heard him say that, ever. I hear him talk with great pride and dignity, this sense of putting his life at the service of his country. And so to think that we can just benefit from that, but not say what he fought for with so many others, that we just take that for granted and just enjoy it without battling to maintain it and hand it on, that would be a travesty. That would be a failure of our duty, the failure of our stewardship. I was talking to some folks who were saying that there's a kind of a truism among the extremely wealthy when it comes to their family's wealth. And they said that, the first generation earns it, the second generation enjoys it, and the third generation wastes it or loses it. That's the cycle. I think we live in a time where if we're not careful, we're going to lose our faith. If we actually take a close look at the demographics, we're fully engaged in that generation of those who have lost their faith. That there are sacrifices, the sacrifices of so many to gain the faith, to build a culture in which Christianity had a voice and a seat at the table, in which the church was influential in society, and we enjoyed it. I'm part of the generation that enjoyed it. I'm part of the generation that enjoyed the good things in our wider society, wider culture, because there still was a significant presence of Christian faith. But now we're in the next generation, the generation of losing, of throwing away, of wasting that faith. And so, not to be, dour or downcast when it comes to, making predictions, but if we can just talk about demographic trends, there's just the terrible losses to the numbers of Catholics who have become inactive, who have walked away from the faith, who have rejected the faith, who no longer identify with the faith, who are done with the faith, who have none faith. The idea of there being an atheist a generation ago, someone who said, yeah, I don't believe in God, it was just not in the air. It just wasn't. It was like, oh, we got to pray for that guy. He's obviously, he's not living with his eyes wide open. And he's obviously not a person of prayer, because, boy, you just obviously would be a person of belief, because that's just who we are as a people. So this is the new world that we're living in. And so we don't want to be part of a generation that takes for granted the heavy labors and the efforts of the generation that's before us. We have to recognize that we're in a battle, and we've got to take more serious efforts to save our nation. A couple other quotes from Ronald Reagan. A nation's greatness is measured not just by its gross national product or military power, but by the strength of its devotion to the principles and values that bind its people and define their character. A nation's greatness is measured not just by its gross national product or military power, but by the strength of its devotion to the principles and values that bind its people and define their character. Well, God bless us if we can even identify what the principles and values are that bind together us American people and define our character. Can we name one? Can we name one principle or value that binds together all Americans? I don't know. Is it dignity? That every human being has dignity? Is it love? And as soon as I throw out any word, if you're at all paying attention to the world in which we're living in, you're going to be saying, yeah, it just depends on how you define it. It just depends on how are you defining that versus someone else. So what is the principle? What is the value? Is the principle toleration? Is the principle respect? Is the principle dialogue? Is the principle or value? Is the value, I don't know, life? I don't know if we have that sense of a common set of principles and values that bind together we, the people of the United States. I watched a short video that came out. There was some people peacefully protesting, and their protest was something. They were holding like a banner in a public area at an event. It was at a athletic event, like a track and field event. I believe it was in California. And they were basically saying, protect our girls. Protect our girls. Our girls have the right to be able to compete against other girls. And the vitriol, the cussing, the truck mouth quality that were intensely coming at these middle-aged folks who were not on megaphones, and they were not chanting anything. They were just standing there holding their banner, just saying, protect our daughters. Our daughters ought to be protected, and their rights ought to be respected. Some simple message like that. And there were all of this F-bombs just being dropped by these women coming at them. And it's like, oh, wow, that's where we're at. And here's the thing. They wouldn't have experienced that if they had done what? If they just gone to the event. If all they had done is just gone to the event and just peacefully said, I'm going to enjoy the event to which, to the extent that I can. I'm going to watch my daughter or my niece or, cousin or whatever. And just, let me just kind of keep to myself. But the fact that they just stood up and said, let's just make a banner and let's just send this message out quietly. If you disagree with it, just walk by it. No. You're not permitted to disagree. You are not allowed to take a stand that says our girls ought to be protected. Who's against that? Who can be against our girls being protected? Our girls being defended? Our girls being kept safe? Our girls being allowed to participate against other girls? Who can be against that? Well, let me tell you, there are a lot of stores out there. There are a lot of corporations out there. There are a lot of people out there who are going to become increasingly intense, pervasive, on the offense, on the offense, coming against you if you stand up and just show up. Just show up as, here's what we stand for. Here's what we believe in. And are we ready for that? Or are we soft? Are we going to be capable of that? Or are we going to cower? Are we willing to take the initiative to do something like that and face the persecution, face the loss of reputation, face the scowls, the vitriol of those who are going to present a demonic position, this transgender ideology and the use of hormones and eviscerating surgeries on teens without parental involvement or permission, these trends that are just moving kids away from the peaceful blossoming of their own sense of sexual identity as the God-given reality of male and female. It's demonic. So let me go back to Ronald Reagan. I'm using him as kind of a little bridge between him, a president, a Christian man of God, right? A Christian man who raised to that role as president, was not afraid to bring in elements of faith and God in his time as president. And so I want to draw out ways that we can more directly connect this to our own battle today. I'll start with one that goes back, 18 years before he was, or 16 years before he was elected president. He said, "We are at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it has been said, if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening." Okay, he was saying that in 1964 in his famous proclamation or statement, The Choosing. But I want you to hear this in 2023, that we as Catholics are the ones being addressed. And the war that we're fighting is against the demonic transgender ideology in its multi-headed form. We, Catholic Christian disciples of Jesus Christ, are at war with the most dangerous and demonic enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's this transgender ideology. And it has been said, if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this freedom of ours, and, brothers and sisters, of our children and grandchildren, and the children and grandchildren that are in this world but not part of our families, history will record with the greatest astonishment that we, Catholics and Christians and Americans who had the most to lose, did the least to prevent It's happening. That's on us. That is on us. And you might say, okay, Tom, what do I do? What do I do? Stop talking to me about the fact that we're in a battle and we have to do something. What am I supposed to do? Fast today. Fast. Give something up. Do something difficult that has nothing to do with what you want, nothing to do with what is easy for you, nothing to do with what is pleasant for you. You are going to do something pleasant. Don't do it. You're going to have a dessert today. Give it up. You are going to watch your favorite show today. Go pray instead. You are going to pray today for a half an hour. Pray for an hour. You are going to sit in your comfortable chair. Don't sit in a chair that's not as comfortable. So this is why we're in a battle. This is why we're in a battle. The struggle now, this is the last quote from Ronald Reagan, the struggle now going on for the world will never be decided by bombs or rockets, by armies or military might. The real crisis we face today is a spiritual one. At root, it is a test of moral will and faith. The struggle now going on for the world will never be decided by bombs or rockets, by armies or military might. The real crisis we face today is a spiritual one. At root, it is a test of moral will and faith. Wow. There's Ronald Reagan. It was powerful. Wouldn't you love to hear that from a president today? Just all the greater need we have to pray for our political leaders, our presidents, our senators, our members of the House of Representatives, state level, national level, or at the federal level, for our judges, for political leaders. God bless us. For such a time as this, we've been planted here. St. Joan of Arc, pray for us. All right. Thanks so much for being with me today on Sound Insight. God bless you all. Join me tomorrow.